This is the Zodiac speaking.
Chilling. It's almost a Pavlovian response at this point, isn't it?
It is.
Just hearing those 5 words,
Yeah.
it triggers a specific kind of cultural anxiety.
Absolutely. It's not just a movie quote anymore. For a whole generation, especially in Northern California, that was the introduction to, well, a reign of terror.
It really was.
It's iconic in the absolute worst way possible.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a file that I think a lot of people feel they know.
Oh, for sure.
You know, they've seen the movies, they've heard the stories. We're talking about the Zodiac Killer. But, and I want to be really clear about this right up front, this isn't going to be us just retelling campfire ghost stories.
No, absolutely not. The mission for us today is more of a forensic audit. We've pulled the original police reports, the FBI files, the teletypes from Riverside, Benicia, Vallejo, and, of course, San Francisco.
And the really crucial part, the cryptographic papers.
Yes. The papers published in 2020 that finally cracked the code that everyone thought was completely unsolvable. That's the part I'm most excited to get into the math, because for 50 years, this case was treated like he was a phantom, some kind of ghost.
A supervillain.
Right. But when you really dig into the files, it's actually a story about patterns, about massive failures in communication between departments, and some really specific, tangible clues that were just missed.
We call them unread clues.
Unread clues. I like that. And to find them, we have to look at the timeline a little differently. We aren't just looking at the murders themselves, we're looking at the silence between them. We're going to cover the canonical attacks, of course.
You have to.
But we're also going to spend some real time back in 1966 in Riverside with a crime that officially isn't even a Zodiac crime. But, well, let's just say the files strongly suggest otherwise.
The Riverside connection is, I think, the skeleton key for the whole personality. If you can understand what happened there, the rest of the madness starts to make a terrifying kind of sense.
Exactly. So we've got the crimes, we've got the suspects, including, of course, Arthur Lee Allen, and we'll get into the very controversial Gary Post theory that blew up a few years back.
Right, the case breakers theory.
And the ciphers. So let's stop treating him like a myth. Let's start treating him like a suspect.
Yeah.
Where do we begin this?
We have to start before the hood, before the letters, before the name Zodiac even existed. We have to go back to Halloween, 1966.
Okay, let's unpack this. Riverside, California. This is important because it's completely distinct from the Bay Area crimes everyone knows. It's Southern California.
Totally different area. It's October 30th, 1966, the night before Halloween. Riverside is, warm, dry, kind of a desert climate.
Yeah.
And our victim is a young woman named Cherie Jo Bates. She was 18 years old.
Just a kid.
Just a kid. And reading her file is just heartbreaking because she is the definition of a bright future. She's a freshman at Riverside City College, a former varsity cheerleader. Everyone described her as sweet, outgoing. She wanted to be a flight attendant.
The classic girl next door archetype.
She absolutely was. So that Sunday, she drives to the campus library to study. It's late afternoon, the sun's starting to go down. And this is where we find the very first signature behavior of the predator we're tracking.
The car.
The car. She drove a lime green Volkswagen Beetle.
An iconic car for that era. Very noticeable.
Very distinct. Now, she comes out of the library later that evening, gets into her car, turns the key, and nothing. The engine cranks, it turns over, but it just won't catch.
So your first thought is probably, bad battery, or maybe I flooded the engine. But the Riverside Police Department, the RPD, they found something else entirely.
It was sabotage.
Yeah.
Very specific sabotage. When the police inspected the car later, they found that the distributor coil wire had been pulled out.
Okay, can we just pause on that for a second? Because I want to make sure I understand the mechanics here. I'm not a car guy. Pulling that specific wire, what does that do?
So in those older engines, the distributor is what sends the high voltage spark to each spark plug in the right order. The coil wire is the main wire that feeds power to the distributor. So if you pull that wire, the battery still works. The headlights will come on, the radio will play, the starter motor will make that rrrr sound like it's trying to start.
Which is almost more frustrating than a totally dead battery. It gives you this false hope that it might start.
Exactly. That's the psychological component. If the battery were just dead, you'd know instantly, okay, I need to jump. But this invites you to keep trying. It creates confusion, it creates panic, and most importantly, it creates a window of time where the driver is confused, vulnerable, and probably going to get out of the car.
Or it creates a perfect opportunity for a so-called Good Samaritan to just happen to walk by.
That is the working theory, that the killer disabled the car, then just waited.
Yeah.
Waited in the shadows. He watches her struggle with it. Then he walks up and says, "Having car trouble. Let me give you a hand."
That is deeply chilling. It implies he wasn't just hunting for a person, he was setting a trap. He was hunting for a situation he could completely control from start to finish.
It's a ruse. And it's so different from the later crimes, which were these blitz attacks. This was a seduction of trust. He lures her away from the lighted parking lot and into this dark gravel alleyway between two vacant houses nearby. And that's where the attack happened.
And it was brutal.
Extremely brutal, a ferocious physical struggle, stabbing. But in that struggle, the attacker left something behind. A Timex watch.
Just a cheap, basic watch.
A basic men's Timex.
Mm-hmm.
The band was broken, torn off in the fight. It was stopped at 12.24. But here's the crucial detail, the clue that matters for our suspect profiling much later on. The watch face had paint spatters on it.
Paint spatter.
Tiny little specks of what looked like white or off-white house paint.
Okay, so everyone listening, keep that in mind. Paint. Now, officially, the Riverside PD kept this case separate from the Zodiac for a very long time.
Decades.
But the connection isn't just the car campering, it's the writing.
Oh, this guy loved to write. About a month after Sherry Jo Bates was killed, a letter arrives. Actually, two identical letters. One to the Riverside Police and one to local paper, the Press Enterprise.
And it was typewritten.
Yes, typewritten and titled simply The Confession.
And it wasn't vague at all.
No, it contained details only the police and the killer could possibly know. Specifically, he mentioned disabling the car by tampering with the middle wire of the distributor.
He's showing off.
He is. But listen to the motive he gives. He writes, and I'm quoting here, "Only one thing was on my mind, making her pay for the brush-offs that she had given me during the years prior."
Making her pay for the brush-offs. Wow, that screams inadequacy, doesn't it? It's not random. It's deeply personal and rooted in rejection.
It is the absolute rage of the rejected. It paints this psychological picture of someone who feels invisible, someone who feels slighted, probably by women in general. And he uses this horrific violence to reclaim a sense of power.
And then it gets even stranger.
It does. 6 months later, a custodian is cleaning out a storage area at the college and finds a desk. And carved into the surface of this desk is a poem, a very dark poem.
The desk hum.
Right. It's titled, "Sick of Living Unwilling to Die." And the police bring in a handwriting expert, a man named Sherwood Morrill, who becomes the absolute go-to guy for the entire Zodiac case. And he looks at the writing on the desk.
And what does he say?
He says it is unquestionably the same handwriting as the future Zodiac Killer.
So even before the Zodiac name, before the ciphers, we have a prototype. A killer who sabotages cars, who is motivated by a deep-seated hatred of women who reject him, and who feels this overwhelming need to taunt the police and the press after the fact.
Precisely. And that need for credit, that desperate need to be the smartest person in the room, that is the thread that pulls us north up to the Bay Area 2 years later.
All right, let's move the timeline forward. We're now at December 20, 1968. This is where the Zodiac file officially begins in the eyes of the Department of Justice. We're in Benicia, California, a place called Lake Herman Road.
It's Case File A. The investigation was handled by the Benicia Police Department and the Solano County Sheriff's Office. And the setting is just crucial to understanding this. Lake Herman Road back then was a classic lover's lane.
Meaning dark and secluded.
Pitch black. Rural. There are no street lights, no houses nearby. It's just a lonely two-lane road connecting Benicia and Vallejo.
The victims are David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16. And it's their first date.
Just kids. High school kids out on their first real date. They're parked in a gravel turnout off the side of the road. Another car pulls up, parks right beside them. And this is where that madman theory really starts.
Because the motive is just absent.
Completely. He doesn't rob them. There's no sexual assault on Betty Lou. He fires into the car a .22 caliber pistol to force them out into the open.
It's pure, unadulterated chaos.
David is shot in the head, point blank, almost immediately as he's getting out of the car. Betty Lou, she actually makes a run for it. She gets out and runs across the gravel, and he just guns her down from behind. She was shot 5 times in the back.
It's a flat-out execution. This isn't a crime of passion in any traditional sense. It's like he's hunting.
That's the feeling you get reading the Benicia police reports. It was cold. It was efficient. The ammunition he used was Winchester Western Super X copper-coated bullets. He was prepared. And then silence.
Nothing.
No letters immediately after this one. No phone calls. Just 2 dead teenagers in the middle of nowhere and absolutely no leads.
That silence lasts for about 7 months. We call this the cooling off period in criminal profiling.
In serial killer psychology, yes. It's the time after a murder when the fantasy has been fulfilled. The satisfaction of the kill eventually fades, the urge returns, and often the fantasy escalates. He needs to recreate that feeling of power, but bigger, better.
And escalate it did. July 4th, 1969, Independence Day, Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. This is Case File B.
And this investigation is handled by the Vallejo Police Department. The setup is very, very similar to the first crime. Another couple in a parked car, Darlene Ferrin, who was 22, and Michael Mageau, 19.
Another lover's lane type of spot.
Basically, yeah. It's a public park, but it's late at night, around midnight. It's deserted. A car pulls up behind them, its lights on, then it drives away. You think, okay, that was weird, but they don't think much of it. A few minutes later, the car comes back.
And this is where the behavior shifts a little. He doesn't just start shooting. The killer gets out, walks up to their car, but he's holding a big flashlight. He shines it right in their eyes, blinding them.
And Mageau's first thought, he said later, was that it was a police officer. It's that authority dynamic again. You see a flashlight in your window late at night, you assume it's a cop checking on you. He starts rolling down the window to get his ID out.
And the killer just opens fire with a 9mm Luger. No words, nothing.
Just a hail of bullets.
Darlene Ferrin is killed. But Michael Mageau miraculously survives. He's shot in the jaw, the shoulder, his leg. But he lives. And because he lives, we get our first real description of the killer.
And it's not some monster, it's just a man. Mageau described him as a beefy guy, maybe 195, 200 pounds, about 5'8". He had short, curly, light brown hair.
Yeah.
Just a normal-looking guy.
Yeah. But the real escalation here isn't the shooting itself. It's what happens 40 minutes later. At 12:40 in the morning, the phone rings at the Vallejo Police Department.
And a dispatcher named Nancy Slover picks up. Now, you have to imagine this. It's 1969. There's no caller ID, no way to trace the call quickly. It's just a voice coming out of the dark.
This gives me goosebumps every single time I read the transcript. The voice on the other end says, "I want to report a double murder."
And he's calm. Nancy Slover described his voice as low, monotonous, almost rehearsed, like he was reading from a script.
He says, if you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger.
And then comes the bombshell.
He says, "I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." And he just hangs up.
He connected the crimes for them. He realized the police hadn't linked Lake Herman Road to Blue Rock Springs yet, and his ego couldn't handle it. He had to have the credit.
So now the police know for sure they have a serial offender on their hands. And this is when the letters start pouring into the newspapers. The San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, the Vallejo Times-Herald.
And the first line is always the same.
This is the Zodiac speaking.
He creates his own persona. He's not just a killer anymore. He's a brand. He's a supervillain in his own mind. And he threatens to kill more people if they don't publish his ciphers on the front page of their papers. He is holding the entire Bay Area hostage with fear.
Which brings us to what is, for me, maybe the most bizarre and terrifying incident in the entire file. September 27th, 1969. Lake Berryessa. Case File C.
This is the outlier. It's the anomaly in the pattern. Up until now, it's been late at night, couples in cars, attacks with guns, quick getaways. Lake Berryessa is completely different.
How so?
It's in the middle of the afternoon. It's broad daylight. It's quiet. A young couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, are picnicking on a little peninsula by the water.
And Cecilia sees a man. He's watching them from the trees. Then he steps out. And he's wearing a costume.
It's pure, terrifying theatricality. He's wearing a black, square-shaped executioner's hood that drapes down over his chest. And right on the bib, intricately stitched or drawn in white, is that cross-circle symbol, the Zodiac symbol. And he has clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes of the hood.
Why? I mean, really, what is the purpose of that? If your goal is just to kill them, why the elaborate costume?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some psychologists suggest it's a way of dissociating. He's not just some guy anymore. He's becoming the avatar. He isn't the loser from Riverside who gets rejected. He is the Zodiac. He's all-powerful.
And he talks to them.
He does. He engages them in this long conversation. He tells them this elaborate lie.
"I'm an escaped convict from a prison in Montana. I killed a guard. I need your car and your money to get to Mexico."
But he didn't need the car. He didn't take their money. He never even tried to start the car.
No. It was all about control. It was about prolonging the terror. He makes Cecilia tie up Brian with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. Then he checks her knots and ties her up.
And then he switches weapons. He puts his gun away and pulls out a long knife.
Brian Hartnell, who miraculously survived this nightmare, said the killer had this really nervous energy. He said his hands were visibly shaking before he started stabbing them, which is a fascinating detail.
It is. Is it fear of getting caught? Or is it the adrenaline, the excitement of the moment finally hitting him?
He stabs them both repeatedly. It's incredibly brutal. But then, afterwards, he just calmly walks back to Brian's car. A Volkswagen Carmen Ghia, takes out a black felt-tip pen and starts writing on the car door.
He's leaving his signature. He writes the dates of his previous attacks. Vallejo, 12/20/68, 7/4/69, and then the date of the current attack, Sept 27/69, and the time, 6:30. And in 2 words, by knife.
He's keeping score. He's updating his resume.
He is treating the crime scene like a public ledger. This proves that for him, the victims are almost secondary. The Zodiac brand, the persona, that's the primary objective. He wanted the Napa County Sheriff's Office to find that car and know, without a doubt, exactly who did this.
Cecilia Shepard tragically died from her injuries 2 days later, but Brian Hartnell lived. And his description of the hood and the killer's voice, it matches the general profile. A heavyset man, speaks in a calm, almost monotone voice, but is clearly very, very dangerous.
And then, just 2 weeks later, he changes the entire game again. He moves from the secluded lakes and lovers' lanes right into the heart of San Francisco. Presidio Heights, October 11th, 1969.
This is case file D, and this is the murder of Paul Stein, a cab driver.
This one feels messy. It feels almost improvised compared to the others. He hails a cab in the city, has Stein drive him to the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets. It's a very nice, wealthy neighborhood, foggy, quiet.
And he shoots Stein, execution style, in the head. But this time, he's not alone. There are witnesses. 3 teenagers in a house right across the street are having a party, and they look out a second-story window and see this happening.
They see the whole thing. They see the killer in the front seat with the driver. They see him wiping down the inside of the cab, probably to get rid of fingerprints. They see him take Stein's wallet and his keys. They call the police immediately.
And here is the broken clue. The massive, unbelievable blunder that might have changed history. The police dispatcher, in the chaos of the call, puts out the alert for a suspect who is a black male.
It was a catastrophic error. We don't know why it happened, if the kids were misheard, or if the dispatcher just made a mistake, but the result was devastating. Officers Don Fook and Eric Zelms are speeding to the scene. A block away, they see a man walking down the sidewalk.
A heavy-set white man.
Wearing a dark jacket, glasses.
Yeah.
He fits the Zodiac description we now have perfectly.
Yeah.
But because they were on the lookout for a black suspect, they don't even stop him. They might have called out, "Did you see anything?" But they drive right past him.
They drive right past the Zodiac Killer.
It's almost certain it was him. In a later letter to the Chronicle, Zodiac mocks them for it. He says something like, "I was walking down the hill and 2 cops pulled a goof and drove right by."
Imagine being those officers. That has to haunt you for the rest of your life.
And the Zodiac, he proves it was him in the most gruesome, undeniable way possible. He tears off a piece of Paul Stein's bloodstained shirt.
From the back, where no one would notice it was missing right away.
Exactly. And he mails that piece of fabric, stained with his victim's blood, to the San Francisco Chronicle, along with his next letter.
That is the definitive proof. There is no copycat in the world who could have gotten that piece of the shirt.
It's his trophy and his proof of purchase, all in one. So by the end of 1969, we have this terrifying picture. 4 confirmed attack sites, 5 people dead, 2 survivors, and a killer who is actively communicating with the world, creating his own mythology, and daring anyone to catch him.
So who is he? This brings us to, I think, the most frustrating part of the whole story. Section 3. The suspects. We have the usual suspects in some of these newer theories, but there is one name that just towers over this entire case. Arthur Lee Allen.
Arthur Leigh Allen. If you were writing this as a movie script, he is your villain. The amount of circumstantial evidence that points to him it's just staggering. It's almost too perfect.
Let's just run down the list for a minute. He lived in Vallejo, right in the heart of the murder locations. He owned a Zodiac brand wristwatch.
Which, by the way, has the cross-circle symbol right on the face. It was their logo.
He owned a Royal typewriter with an elite type font, which is the same kind used for the letters sent from Riverside. He wore a size 10.5 wing walker boot, and investigators found a footprint from that exact type of boot at the Lake Berryessa crime scene.
And the testimony from people who knew him is absolutely damning. His friend, a man named Don Chaney, went to the police and told them that back in January 1969, this is before the name Zodiac was ever public, Allen had told him about this warped idea he had for a novel.
What was the idea?
He wanted to write a story about a man who would hunt people with a gun and a flashlight attached to it. He'd taunt the police with letters, and the main character would call himself Zodiac.
That is, I mean, how is that possibly a coincidence? And then you have Michael Mageau, the survivor from the Blue Rock Springs attack. Years later, in 1991, the police show him a photo lineup. He points right at Arthur Lee Allen's picture and says, "That's him, I'm sure of it."
It really seems like a slam dunk. It does. But this is a forensic reanalysis, and we have to be objective and look at why he was never charged. Because for all that circumstantial evidence, the forensic evidence just didn't match up.
Okay, let's start with fingerprints.
They lifted bloody prints from the inside of Paul Stein's cab. They did not match Arthur Lee Allen.
What about the handwriting?
This is a huge one. Handwriting experts, including Sherwood Morrill, looked at Allen's writing for decades. They all concluded he did not write the Zodiac letters. And they even considered that he might be trying to disguise his writing or that he was ambidextrous, so they checked samples from both hands. Still no match.
And then there's the big one, the DNA.
The DNA is the biggest point of contention in the entire case against him. In 2002, forensic scientists were finally able to develop a partial DNA profile from saliva they found on a stamp from one of the Zodiac's letters.
Ugh.
It did not match Arthur Lee Allen. Case closed, right?
Well, not exactly. I've heard a lot of arguments about the validity of that DNA sample.
You have, and they are very valid arguments. The sample was taken from the outside surface of the stamp, not from underneath where the glue and saliva would be sealed.
So it could be contamination.
It could easily be contamination. It could be from a mail handler at the post office, a clerk at the newspaper, anyone who touched that letter in transit over the years. So while it officially cleared him in 2002, a lot of the original investigators think that exoneration is shaky at best.
Now we have to talk about the new information. The 2024 documentary, This is the Zodiac Speaking, it brought forward testimony from the Seawater family.
This was a fascinating and, frankly, disturbing development. The Seawater children, who are now adults, claim that Allen was a family friend, the teacher who was close to their family back in the 60s. And they claim he took them on these outings that align terrifyingly well with some key murder dates.
Specifically, they mentioned Tajiga's Point in 1963 and Riverside in 1966.
Exactly. Tajiga's Point, near Santa Barbara, is where a young couple, Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards, were killed in a style very similar to the Lake Berryessa attack. It's often linked to Zodiac as a possible precursor crime. The Seawaters claim Allen took them there, left them in the car for a while, came back with bloody hands, and sped off.
And what about Riverside?
They claim he took them to Riverside on the very weekend that Cherry Joe Bates was killed. If these memories are accurate, and that's a big if after so many decades, it places the prime suspect at the scene of the two biggest pre-Zodiac crimes that fit the profile.
It makes the circumstantial case against Allen just overwhelming. But again, without that forensic match, a fingerprint, DNA.
It remains a mystery. And that vacuum, that lack of certainty, it allows other suspects to enter the picture. Which brings us to Gary Post.
Ah, the case breakers theory. This made huge news back in 2021. So who is Gary Post?
Gary Post was a house painter who lived in the Sierra foothills. He died in 2018. The case breakers are a group of cold case specialists, retired law enforcement journalists, and they claim he is the guy. And their biggest piece of evidence is visual. It's about scars.
The police sketch from the Presidio Heights murder, the one the teenagers helped create, it shows a man with what look like lines or maybe scars on his forehead.
Right. The case breakers found photos of Gary Post where he has these very distinct scars on his forehead. And they claim that if you overlay the sketch, they line up perfectly. They also point to the Riverside connection. Remember the Timex watch found at the Cherry Joe Bates scene?
It had paint splatter on it.
And Gary Post was a professional house painter.
That is a compelling link.
It is. They also claim to have a source that places him at the March Air Force Base Hospital, which is only about 15 minutes from the murder scene, getting treated for a gun accident around that exact time.
It sounds compelling on the surface, but the police haven't really jumped on board with this theory, have they?
No, not at all. The Riverside PD and the SFPD have been very cool, very dismissive of this theory. They've essentially said there's no DNA link to Post, and that relying on forehead wrinkles in a composite sketch versus a photograph is highly subjective and not hard evidence. It's an interesting theory, but it lacks even the volume of circumstantial evidence that the case against Allen has.
It just feels like every few years someone comes forward and says, case closed, but the file always remains open. And a huge part of that file, a huge part of the whole mythology, is the codes. Section 4, the ciphers. This is the math behind the madness.
This is what makes the Zodiac unique among serial killers. He wasn't just a murderer, he was a puzzler. He had this desperate need to prove his intellectual superiority over everyone, the public, the press, and especially the police.
The first one he sent, the Z408, that was solved pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, that one came in 3 parts with his first letters in 1969. It was a basic substitution cipher. A high school history teacher and his wife, Donald and Betty Harden, they cracked it over a weekend at their kitchen table.
And a message was just chilling.
I like killing people because it's so much fun. It revealed this delusional motive about collecting slaves for the afterlife, or paradise as he spelled it.
But the Z340, that was the white whale.
The Z340. 340 characters of pure gibberish. He sent it to the Chronicle on November 8th, 1969. And for 51 years, the best cryptographers in the world, the FBI, the NSA, amateur sleuths, nobody could crack it. It was just a wall of symbols.
I really want to dig into this because I think the average person, when you hear code, you just think of a simple A equals B, like in the first cipher. But this was different. Why was this one so much harder?
Because the Zodiac changed the rules of the game. He didn't just swap letters for symbols, which is substitution. He added a second incredibly difficult layer of encryption called transposition.
Okay, explain that to me like I'm 5.
All right, imagine you write a message on a piece of graph paper. Let's say, I like killing.
Yeah.
With a substitution cipher, you just swap the letters for symbols. But with transposition, you then scramble the positions of those symbols based on a complex geometric pattern.
So even if you figure out that, say, a triangle symbol equals the letter E, the E is in the completely wrong place in the sentence.
Exactly. It's like you have a bag of Scrabble tiles that are the right letters for the message, but they've been glued to the board in what seems like random spots.
But it wasn't random. That's the key.
It wasn't random. There was a system, but it was incredibly complex. It wasn't until December of 2020 that a team of 3 private citizens, David Orenjak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck, finally figured out the specific geometric rule he used.
And they used supercomputers for this.
They used a powerful software called AZ Decrypt to run through thousands of possibilities, but the final breakthrough was pure human intuition. They had a hunch that the Zodiac hadn't written the message left to right like a normal sentence. They realized you had to read it diagonally.
Diagonally? How does that even work?
Think of how a knight moves on a chessboard. They figured out a pattern where you start at the first symbol in the top left corner, then you read the symbol that's down 1 row and 2 columns to the right. That's the second letter of the message. Then from there, you go down 1 and over 2 again.
Wait, hold on. So if I'm looking at this wall of symbols to get a simple 3-letter word like the-H-E, I might have to read a symbol from line 1, then jump down to line 2, then jump again to line 3.
Precisely. And to make it even harder, when you got to the edge of the grid, the pattern would wrap around to the other side but shifted down a line. It's what cryptographers call a period 19 transposition based on how the message was broken into vertical segments. It's fiendishly difficult.
That sounds incredibly difficult to construct by hand in 1969.
That is the most terrifying insight. He didn't have a computer. He almost certainly sat there with a piece of graph paper mapping this entire thing out grid by grid. If he made one single mistake, put one symbol in the wrong box, the entire message would have been permanently indecipherable.
This proves he wasn't just some frenzied madman. He was patient. He was disciplined.
Obsessive. He wanted to be the smartest person in the room so badly that he was willing to create a puzzle that he probably hoped would never be solved. And when they finally did crack it, the message read, "I hope you are having lots of fan-foaming trying to catch me."
He spelled fun, F-A-N.
He did. Another one of his classic misspellings. But the message itself it was almost an anticlimax. There was no name, no coordinates for a hidden bomb, just more of the same taunting. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner.
Paradise with the C again?
Always with the misspellings. Some people think it was a deliberate ploy to throw off handwriting analysis or psychological profiling. Others just think he was a poor speller, but had a logical structural mind.
It's just terrifying to think about him sitting there drawing out that grid, moving the letters one by one, knowing he's locking his secrets away for what turned out to be half a century.
And realizing that, in a way, he succeeded. Whoever he was, he died long before we ever read that message.
So where does that leave us today? Section 5, the unclosed file. We're here in the mid-2020s. Is there any realistic hope of solving this now?
The hope, as it always is in these modern cold cases, lies in forensic genealogy and advanced DNA testing. But even on that front, it has been deeply frustrating.
I read that the Vallejo Police Department sent some of the key evidence, the envelopes and stamps, for advanced DNA testing back in 2018.
They did, and recent reports from 2025 have suggested that they did manage to obtain a partial profile, but it was an exclusion profile.
Meaning it was only useful for proving who the Zodiac wasn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They could run it against their top suspects, like Allen or Post, and it ruled them out. But it didn't give them a positive ID. The problem is that touch DNA issue we talked about.
Yeah.
These letters and stamps have been handled by dozens of police officers, journalists, and file clerks for decades, long before wearing gloves at crime scenes was standard practice.
So the evidence is just too contaminated.
It's heartbreaking. The answer might literally be there on the back of a stamp, but it's buried under layers and layers of other people's DNA.
It all comes back to these unread clues. Is there one you keep coming back to, one perspective that maybe we've missed?
I think it's the sketch discrepancy. You have the teenagers at Presidio Heights who gave the details for the famous composite sketch with the glasses. But then you have Officer Fook, who drove past him, who described a man who looked different. You have Mago, who described the beefy man. The descriptions were similar, but not identical.
That inconsistency allowed him to just slip through the cracks every single time?
It did. And you have to look at it psychologically, too. Look at the timeline. The credible, confirmed Zodiac letters just stop in 1974. Why?
Did he die? Did he get arrested for something else and sent to prison?
Or, and this is the scariest thought to me, did he just get bored? Did he decide he had won the game? He'd terrified a major American region. He'd stumped the greatest code breakers in the world. Maybe he just went back to his life as a mechanic or a teacher or a house painter and just lived, watching the movies they made about him, knowing he got away with it.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. And this is the one that really keeps me up at night.
Think about the luck. The sheer, dumb, unbelievable luck this person had. Did his gun jam at Lake Herman Road? No. But driving away from Blue Rock Springs without a single witness and walking right past two police officers in San Francisco and them not stopping you because of a simple radio error.
So, was the Zodiac a criminal mastermind, a cryptographic genius who planned every move? Or was he just a lucky, sadistic loser who stumbled into infamy because of a series of police mistakes and fortunate breaks?
And is the real answer the one piece of evidence that could finally close this file, sitting in a dusty cardboard box in the Vallejo PD evidence room right now, just waiting for one scientist to finally find a way to swab the back of a stamp just right?
I guess we'll just have to wait for the next breakthrough. But until then, the codes may be broken, but the case is definitely not closed.
Not closed at all.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. If you want to see the solved 340 cipher for yourself, or the police sketches we talked about, we'll have links in the show notes.
Keep looking for the patterns.
Until the next deep dive.